Yes, science!
Have you ever noticed that things feel more valuable when you've worked hard for them? That IKEA bookshelf you spent hours assembling? It somehow feels more special than one that came pre-assembled. That meal you spent all day cooking? It tastes better than takeout, even if objectively it's the same quality. This isn't just in your head, it's literally in your brain. And scientists just figured out exactly how it works. A groundbreaking study just published in Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, has uncovered the precise brain mechanism that makes us value rewards more when we've worked harder for them. And here's what's wild. This isn't just a human thing. From ants to birds to humans, animals across the evolutionary tree prefer rewards they had to work for. Scientists call this the effort paradox. Effort is both costly and valued. But why does this happen? What's going on in our brains that makes a hard-earned reward feel better than a free one? That's what researchers at Stanford University set out to discover. And what they found involves a beautiful dance between two of your brain's most important chemicals, dopamine and acetylcholine. Let me break it down for you. First, let's talk about dopamine, probably the most famous neurotransmitter in your brain. You've probably heard it called the pleasure chemical or the reward chemical, but that's actually not quite right. Dopamine isn't about pleasure itself, it's about motivation and the anticipation of rewards. When you get a reward, let's say eating your favorite food, dopamine floods into a brain region called the nucleus accumbens. This dopamine burst tells your brain, hey, that was good. Remember what we did to get it? Now here's where it gets interesting. The researchers found that dopamine release isn't the same for every reward. It changes based on how much effort you put in to get it. In their experiments with mice, when the animals had to press a lever just once for a sugar reward, they got a nice little dopamine bump. But when they had to press the lever 46 times for the same reward, the dopamine release was massive, almost 3 times higher. Same reward, same amount of sugar. But working harder for it made the brain's reward signal much, much stronger. Now, scientists have known for a while that dopamine cells in a brain area called the ventral tegmental area send signals to the nucleus accumbens when rewards arrive. So, the obvious hypothesis was, maybe when you work harder, these dopamine neurons just fire more intensely. But that's not what the researchers found. They did something incredibly sophisticated. They recorded from dopamine cell bodies in the midbrain, dopamine axons in the nucleus accumbens, and measured dopamine release, all at the same time in the same mouse. And here's what blew their minds. The dopamine neurons themselves plateaued pretty quickly. After moderate effort, they weren't getting much more excited. But dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens kept climbing and climbing with more effort. It was like the central command center was saying, okay, that's enough excitement, but the troops on the ground were getting more amped up anyway. To prove this, they actually shut down the dopamine neurons in the midbrain while recording in the nucleus accumbens. And you know what? The effort-based increase in dopamine release still happened. So, if it's not the dopamine neurons themselves, what's going on? This is where acetylcholine enters the story. Acetylcholine is another neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger in your brain. It's involved in learning, attention, and muscle control. But scientists have long known that in brain slices in a dish, acetylcholine can directly trigger dopamine release, even without dopamine neurons firing. The question was, does this actually happen during real behavior? The researchers measured acetylcholine release while mice worked for rewards, and they saw something remarkable. Acetylcholine spiked right before the dopamine release, and the amount of acetylcholine correlated perfectly with how much effort the mouse had just expended. Low effort, small acetylcholine spike. High effort, massive acetylcholine spike. The acetylcholine was coming from special cells called cholinergic interneurons. These are like local modulators sitting right there in the nucleus accumbens, ready to amplify the dopamine signal. Here's the beautiful part. When acetylcholine is released, it binds to receptors on the dopamine axons themselves, not the cell bodies, but the terminals right there in the nucleus accumbens. This triggers the axons to release more dopamine than they would have otherwise. It's like acetylcholine is turning up the volume knob on the dopamine signal, but only when you've worked hard for the reward. So the researchers did what good scientists do. They tested their hypothesis by breaking things. They used a drug called DH-beta-E that blocks the acetylcholine receptors on dopamine terminals. And when they gave this drug to mice performing the effort task, something fascinating happened. At low effort levels, just a few lever presses, dopamine release was totally normal. The drug had no effect. But at high effort levels, the dopamine boost completely disappeared. It was like the brain's reward system couldn't tell the difference between easy and hard-earned rewards anymore. And this had real consequences for behavior. Mice with blocked acetylcholine signaling stopped working hard for rewards. They'd still work a little bit for easy rewards, but when the effort requirement went up, they basically gave up. They also used genetic techniques to silence the cholinergic interneurons and optogenetics to shut them down with light. Every method gave the same result. No acetylcholine, no effort-based dopamine boost, no motivation to work hard. Okay, so why should you care about mouse brains and neurotransmitters? Because this mechanism explains something fundamental about human nature. It's why you cherish the garden you planted more than store-bought flowers. Why marathon runners feel more accomplished than people who take the elevator. Why entrepreneurs often love the businesses they built from scratch more than ones they bought. Why that A you worked your butt off for feels better than the easy A in an easier class. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. Animals that valued hard-earned rewards would keep trying even when food was scarce or difficult to obtain. They wouldn't give up just because hunting was hard. They'd persist, and that persistence would help them survive. This research also has implications for understanding addiction. The same nicotinic receptors that amplify dopamine release after effort are the exact same receptors that nicotine from cigarettes activates. Understanding how these receptors modulate motivation could help develop better treatments for addiction. And it opens up new questions. Can we harness this mechanism to help people maintain motivation for challenging goals? Could understanding this pathway help people with depression, where motivation is often impaired? So next time you're putting together that IKEA furniture, or grinding through a difficult workout, or working late on a project you care about, remember, your brain is literally rewiring itself to make that accomplishment feel more valuable. The acetylcholine in your nucleus accumbens is cranking up the dopamine volume, telling you, this was worth it. You earned this. It's not just psychology, it's biology. It's a mechanism that evolution built into your brain over millions of years to keep you striving, working, and achieving. And that's pretty amazing. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into this research, I've linked the original Nature paper in the description. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into neuroscience, hit that subscribe button. We've got more hot new science coming your way. What's something you've worked really hard for that felt especially rewarding? Let me know in the comments. See you next time.